Part 2 of the lecture of the Bauhaus and the new typography will focus more on the new typography. So if you remember from the last part of the first lecture, Walter Gropius closed the Weimar Bauhaus, and several less conservative states were eager to host the institution. So he negotiated a new set of contracts with the mayor of the city of Dessau. For 20 months, Gropius directed the design and construction of a new complex of buildings financed by the Dessau government, and this is still in Germany. The main structure of the building featured 3 wings, one devoted to the workshops, one to the administrative offices, and a third to serve as a student dorm. From the air, the buildings look like an asymmetrical airplane propeller, which is really cool. Asymmetry was also a key aesthetic component of Gropius's plan for the Bauhaus buildings. He really started to conform to the principles of Moholy Nagy's preliminary course, which really focused on engineering, and the Bauhaus buildings are constructive of the most modern industrial materials: steel, reinforced concrete, and glass. And you can see a picture of the building here. So you can see the 3 rectangular blocks were stitched together by 3 corresponding hallways that intersected in the middle. He left the modern materials exposed, demonstrating the beauty of the machine aesthetic. The most dramatic element of the structure is this curtain wall. So if you can see here, this curtain wall of glass that encases the wings housing the workshops. The building does not feature any decorative elements, and instead the geometric abstraction of the composition serves as both the functional and the main visual element. The aesthetic you can see clearly related to the constructivist principles, and the graphic designers tried not to add anything to their compositions that would take away from a given work's clarity and readability. There's 2 statements that help illustrate the modern style of the Bauhaus, and these are important to remember, could potentially show up on a future exam. And those 2 statements were: 1, form follows function. This refers to the integrated nature of the aesthetic and the functional elements. And 2, less is more, which is illustrated by the building's Spartan design. Very clean, very simple. Gropius's building program represented his first opportunity to pursue architecture under the rubric of Gesamtkunstwerk, again, which means total work of art. The majority of the light fixtures, furnishings, equipment, and even the blankets on the students' beds were designed to complement the reductive geometric abstraction and the modern industrial materials of the building themselves. You can see the chairs here were designed using tubular steel, very simple leather forms. And you can see the cubic shapes, very geometric, very square. And there's really a balance of simple forms in this chair. And the materials, unadorned pieces of, in this case, canvas fabric, but I know in some of the other chairs they used leather. This is actually called the Vasily chair, and it was named for Breuer's colleague Vasily Kandinsky. After the Bauhaus moved to Dessau, the constructivist curriculum championed by Moholy Nagy was strengthened, with even more resources devoted to art forms that could serve a modern industrial society. If you remember Herbert Bayer, he was the one that designed the money after the 1923 exhibition. He created a printing workshop that was transformed at Dessau into a new area that focused on commercial as opposed to fine arts. So this is really the beginning of graphic design as we know it today. Bayer was appointed to the head of the revamped workshop that was devoted to typography and advertising, and really allowed graphic design to become more central to the curriculum at the Bauhaus. His mature constructivist style is evident in the poster above, which he designed to publicize an exhibition and birthday celebration for Kandinsky. You can see the compositional grid of the poster, and it has a lot of asymmetry and really complements the plan of the Bauhaus buildings themselves, which that's with a slight angle that you can see here, which is sort of complementing the constructivist look. A principal concern of graphic designers at the Bauhaus was the integration of typography with photographs. So in 1828, Bayer designed a cover for a journal called Bauhaus that featured these simple geometric solids and engineered tools that are fundamental to the machine aesthetic. So you can see the sphere, the cone, and then the ruler and pencil that engineers used. The plastic triangle represents a tool of the engineer, as well as a commitment to exciting industrial materials. The forms recall the Neoplatonist philosophy that was the conceptual basis for so much geometric abstraction during this era. As part of his work at the Dessau Bauhaus, Moholy-Nagy made progress in terms of integrating photography into the design arts. He coined the term typophoto, stating as his goal a set of aesthetic principles that would influence the integration of typography and photography in graphic work. He put his principles into practice in a series of volumes devoted to international developments in modern art. So these are the books that he designed. I believe that there were 8 in total, and they covered topics that included works from the school itself, as well as related movements such as De Style and even Cubism. He published his own essays, including Painting, Photography, and Film, and you can see this cover that combines an orthogonal structure for the text with a very abstract background photograph. So if you look really closely, you can see a photograph back there. And it really gives the image a sense of three-dimensional depth that is not seen in most non-photographic constructivist work. For Moholy-Nagy, the synthesis of the 2 distinct industrial technologies was the key to revolutionizing graphic design so that it can convey the clarity of the modern spirit. At this time, however, even though this is photography, he experimented with a lot of camera-less photographic techniques, so without the camera. So the result was shown in the example is more of an atmospheric overview of the unidentifiable shapes. So using light, photo conductive paper that was probably coated with emulsion, and different experimental techniques like that. This was a publicity leaflet for the Bauhaus books. I'm not going to pronounce that word. In this leaflet that humorously referenced letterpress, so you can see the letterpress letters right here, and photographic printing technologies. He used a photograph of metal type as the subject, and this same metal type was conveyed the message of the work. So you can see this reflection here. And then using that red and black of the constructivists. And these 2 rows of type create competing perspective devices, leading the eye of the viewer back into space at strange, oblique, contradictory angles. It is important to know that constructivist principles, which started in Russia, were largely depoliticized during the period of 1925 to 28 at the Bauhaus. So they still use the look and the feel of the constructivist art, but without that political statements. Because it was necessary for the school's own survival not to emphasize the radical politics that played a role in the adoption of Russian constructivism. Scholars today view the political climate at the Bauhaus as holding on to one central contradiction. So they embraced the communist ideology and the adoration of capitalist industries that stood as icons of the modern machine age. So this idea of socialism and sort of capitalism and consumerism kind of really fought against each other. The Bauhaus typographers believed that sans serif type was indispensable for 3 reasons, and this is a very important thing to remember. The first reason was that it was the only type capable of expressing the spirit of the machine age. So this idea of the man as the machine, the designer as an engineer. The second point was that sans serif lacked any nationalistic associations, so it could really serve as a unifying force in a post-war era. So just like the De Style artists, they saw sans serif as being neutral. The third is the simple clarity and impersonal character were the best match for photography, hence typophoto. So because the sans serif type didn't have any sort of expressions or feelings associated to it, you could tie it in with photography really well. So this is a stencil typeface designed by Joseph Albers. And you can see each letter has been built out of a set of simple forms, mainly semicircles, rectangles, and triangles, which was really intended to remove any subjective, expressionist, or decorative elements from the letters. Stencil is unusual among the Bauhaus sans serifs in that it appears highly stylized, which kind of lends itself to feeling a little bit more Art Deco. You can kind of think about Broadway and Peignot from earlier lectures. The most famous sans serif experiment to come out of the Bauhaus was Bayer's Universal, which he began to work on in 1923 and revised several times over the years. You can actually find this typeface currently from the foundry called P22. This features universal strokes, so the strokes were uniform thickness. They're made up of perfect circles and horizontal and vertical lines. So some letters, such as the N and the U, are standardized, so they're nearly inverted versions of each other. You can see that here with the N and the U. Like an engineer, Bayer developed the type using only the compass, T-square, and triangle. Another significant aspect of the universal typeface is the fact that it was designed as a single-case alphabet. He said that uppercase letters were unnecessary, and that a single case would be both easier to learn and read, as well as providing a substantial savings for the printing industry, because they could just produce in metal type the lowercase letter forms. When Herbert Bayer joined the faculty of the Bauhaus, all of the school's publications were printed solely in lowercase. His claim that the single-case alphabet would not harm the readability of text was apparently true. Most readers never even noticed the shift that occurred in the Bauhaus publications. Though not designed at the Bauhaus, Futura by Paul Renner was the sans serif that has the longest lasting impact on modern typography. It's actually a typeface that I still use today, and probably some of you have used it as well. Renner was originally trained as an architect, and he advocated the use of the single-case alphabet while hailing the clarity and clean logical forms of geometric sans serifs. His final version of Futura sort of departs from the pure geometry of the earlier prototypes, as he did introduce subtle variations in the strokes of many letters in order to have the letters connect more fluidly with one another. So he did bring in some sense of contrast within his letter forms. Futura quickly gained fame and was adopted by many designers working in the avant-garde style. Kurt Schwitters made Futura the typographical basis for the stationery that he designed in a constructivist style for his home city of Hanover. And this just shows this is a type specimen for the Futura typeface. The year 1928 marks the end of the golden age of the Dessau Bauhaus. By the end of it, Walter Gropius, Moholy-Nagy, and Albers had left the school to pursue other opportunities. A few other directors took over, but their political views further angered the German government. In 1932, the Dessau Bauhaus was closed because of pressure from the newly elected members of the extreme right-wing Nazi Party. In 1933, the Nazi Party gained control over all of Germany, and most of the major artists and designers of the Bauhaus fled Germany for countries that were less hostile to modern art. By 1939, when World War II started, Gropius, Albers, Moholy-Nagy, Herbert Bayer, and Mies van der Rohe had all immigrated to the United States, where they would have enormous impact on the way in which the design arts would be practiced after the war. This brings us to the new typography. The new typography was really the catch-all term for the modern progressive movement of the 1920s that was first used by Moholy-Nagy in 1923. Both the term new typography and the machine aesthetic on display at the Bauhaus exhibition caught the eye of the young German Jan Schishold. He was the son of a lettering artist and sign painter, and had worked as a calligrapher while becoming gradually more involved in the field of typography. He soon established himself as the leading voice in the promotion of the new typography. The most significant contribution Schishold made to the new typography was the creation of 2 publications. They both outlined the theory and practice of a wide range of avant-garde designers. This is one covered that appeared in 1925, and he called this Elementary Typography, and really set out to establish a set of standardized principles that could be easily grasped by printers and those unfamiliar with modern art and design. The texts in this anthology of writings included the Russian Constructivist Manifesto of 1920 and a number of excerpts from Bauhaus publications. You can see the influence of the Russian constructivism with the orthogonal design, these bold red rules, the positive use of negative space, asymmetry, and the sans serif lettering. And in this case, it's even all in lowercase. Schishold was a strong supporter of the abolition of uppercase letters and really aligned himself with Bauhaus designers such as Herbert Bayer. The cover is a great example of a design that eliminates capital letters without sacrificing clarity. You might not have even noticed that there were no capital letters. He really worked to rationalize typography into a functional science, emphasizing simple sans serif letter forms that resulted in the utmost legibility. And this is a quote from Jan Schishold. "The essence of the new typography is clarity. This puts into direct opposition to the old typography, whose aim was beauty and whose clarity did not attain the high level we require today." And this is a handbook that he published, or he created, and it was published by the Educational Department of a Printers Union. It was called Die Neue Typography, which is just German for the new typography. This is a handbook for modern designers, and it was really intended to set out in clear terms the history, theory, and practice of the new typography. The book had rounded corners. You can't see that here in this picture. So the purpose of this book was just to be slipped into a working designer's pocket. It was a pocket reference that he wanted everybody to be able to use and to have. And it really speaks to his adoption of the artist as engineer paradigm, which was favored by the constructivists. So many of the themes talked about in this book is the significance of speed and simultaneity in modern life. The second was the need to work collectively as opposed to individually. And the third theme was the new role of the engineer replacing that of the artist, the goal of clear communication, and the need to integrate typography and photography as the quintessential modern media. This is very important to remember. It could show up in a future exam. He used a lot of different essays by modern designers such as Maholoneji and El Lisitsky. And he really was able to provide a text full of examples that could serve as a fundamental reference for graphic designers both inside and outside the major modern groups. This really served as one of the first textbooks or reference manuals for the use of typography in design. You can see here that this is one of the most famous sets of illustrations from the publication, shows how asymmetry functions to enliven the page. He really did not like symmetry, and he said that symmetry was one of the most deadening elements of what he generally called old typography. So you can see that, keeping everything in the middle, and then instead using asymmetry to do your layouts. Schishold asserted that the new styles must demonstrate an artist's firm control at every turn, and that asymmetry represented a controlled Dadaism, and gaining order through the support of an underlining orthogonal grid. So whenever you hear a professor telling you to use a grid or put the text on a grid or align things with grid, you can thank John Shishold for that. And he also embraced Moholy Nagy's concept of typophoto. So this is a poster he created for the film The Woman Without a Name Part 2. This was a lithograph, and it synthesizes photos of people that have a clear sculptural mass with linear geometric elements that really suggest a three-dimensional space. The photographic elements are arranged on an asymmetrical diagonal axis formed by a linear perspective drawing. And you can see he only used sans serif text because he felt that the modern photograph could only be complemented by sans serif type. Like the other members of the avant-garde, Shishold considered the new typography to serve as the desired model of the merging of art and life that was really a fundamental tenet of the modern design movements. The new typography was to serve as the basis for a more just and equitable society, and his book became known as the Bible of modern functionalism. In 1928, Kurt Schwitters was instrumental in the establishment of a loose group of graphic designers who called themselves the Ring Neue Werkbuchstaller, which is translated to be the Circle of New Advertising Designers. Nicknamed the Ring, this group of graphic designers used exhibitions to promote constructivist aesthetics in the commercial realm. Between 1928 and 1930, members of the Ring displayed their work in cities across Germany and Netherlands via 2 traveling exhibitions. And this is the letterhead that George Trump, who was a German typographer, he used. The design was used by Kurt Schwitters when he circulated new designs for the members of the Ring to peruse and judge. Trump's asymmetrical composition, sans serif lettering, and use of rectangular elements to organize information are all typical of the constructivist style that were favored in this group. The overarching style of most of the Ring designers was drawn from the standards that John Shishold wrote about in the new typography, featuring sans serif's type, organized by an underlying grid, and integrated with elements of photomontage. Obviously, this letterhead doesn't have photomontage, but the other elements in this did. So this is an ad created by Paul Schutima, and he worked on commercial graphics also in a constructivist style. He designed a series of ads for the Dutch scales manufacturer Berkel, combining montaged photos of their product with sans serif lettering. You can also see the use of the red and the black. The vertical bar on the left margin serves to anchor the text and the photo montage right here. So during the time he was associated with the Ring, Jan Shishold designed a cover of a portfolio of photos by reusing El Lissitzky's famous photomontage self-portrait, which was originally called the Constructure. Shishold's catalog was intended to evoke the work and theory of the Soviet filmmaker Dziga Vertov, who had romanticized the eye of the camera as the perfect, dispassionate symbol of modern vision. So you can see sort of the eye in the hand right here.